This is just a sample of the audiobook. To get the complete audiobook, access the link posted in the first comment.
I telephoned Henry Ford, who agreed that we should take the Rolls-Royce job, and when I returned, he surprised me by accepting a contract on the basis of the British getting 60% of the engines. This was surprising because he had declared earlier that Ford Motor Company would not make war supplies for any foreign nation, and he had been severely criticized by the British press for his stand. But I believe the enthusiasm Edsel and I showed for the project influenced his decision. When I arranged for separate rooms to carry on engineering and tooling design, Mr. Ford expressed approval. No one could have been more careful in keeping him informed than Edsel and I had been. Suddenly, he reversed himself. His action was set off by a tactless statement by Lord Beaverbrook that Ford had accepted an order for 6,000 Rolls-Royce engines, and implying that he was now supporting the British. Actually, we had not accepted an order from England. Our dealings were entirely with American officials. Mr. Ford knew that the United States would divert 60% of the order to Britain, but the Beaver's statement was different from the way he saw it, and he made a public denial. 3 days later, I got a call asking me to come over to Edsel's office. Bill Knudsen was there. Henry Ford had sent for him, he said, and he didn't know why. Edsel didn't know why either, and neither did I. In a few moments, Henry Ford came in. He shook hands all around and then told Knudsen what a fine fellow he was. But, he added, you're mixed up with some bad people in Washington, and you're heading for trouble. I don't understand what you are talking about, Mr. Ford, Knudsen replied. I won't make any of those Rolls-Royce engines for England, Ford said. But, Mr. Ford, Knudsen remonstrated, we have your word that you will make them. I told the President your decision, and he was very happy about it. At mention of President Roosevelt, Henry Ford grew tense. We won't build the engine at all, he said. Withdraw the whole order. Take it to someone else. Let them build the engine. We won't. That was the end of the Rolls-Royce for us. Packard took on the contract and built a fine engine. Knudsen left Edsel's office purple with rage. I felt sorry for him. To have to report this scene to the President must have been a bit difficult. Later in the day I saw Henry Ford. I never heard him shout louder. He was wild about Franklin Roosevelt and people in Washington. They want war, he repeated again and again. We heard the same thing for days following at the round table at Dearborn. Roosevelt was tied up with the warmongers of Europe. General Motors, General Electric, United States Steel, and the DuPonts controlled Roosevelt. They had interest in European industries, and they were bent on pushing the United States into the war, and so forth and so on. An equally deep-seated reason was behind Ford's refusal to make these British engines. He admired their engineering excellence, but to manufacture them, he would be making something to somebody else's design, and that thought hurt. When a man's work is merely mediocre, he is let severely alone. But when it sets a standard for all to see and copy, he becomes an object of admiration and envy. That was Henry Ford's situation. The Ford car and its method of manufacture had become a standard for the world, and as long as he got the fame and credit for it, he was satisfied. In all my years with him, I never put so much pressure on him as to persuade him to take part in the government's military aviation program. When Bill Knudsen suggested a few months later that Ford make Pratt & Whitney air-cooled aviation engines, Edsel was all for it. So was I, but the elder Ford said, "Don't make it."